We are going to start with tzedakah and the Rebbe's kapitel and kapitel chaf. So please give some tzedakah. If you have it nearby, you can give it soon. And we'll see the tehillim on the screen. I'm going to tell you reglaim Shalayim Shalayim Bnuya. Shama Lushvatim Shifte Yadis is Joey did the thing with the night. Shama Yeshua Mish with Kislev David. Shalush Lam Yeshalayim Shloya Bayach. Yishal Bechel Shabam Nesayach Lamana Chabreya Dabana Shalom Bach. Laban Bes Adnai Lahino Baksha Taik Lach. Lam Natseach Mizmar David Yan Chadanai Biem Tzaris Agev Chashim El Hayakov Yishlach Ezra Chamikadish and Tzim Sedeka Yiskar Kom Chasecha Bas Chedash and Sela Yitin Chachal Bavacha Bachal Tzachai Malay Niranabi Shu Asecha B'Shem Elohim Yidgal Imalay Adonai Kol Mashal Asecha Ati Yadaiti Ki Ashir Adonai Mashiach Yanim Ush Mekacha B'Gvros Yeshay Minay Ele Baracha Ve'ele Basusim Anachnu B'Shem Adonai Elohim Naskir Him Akar V'Napalu V'Anachnu Kamen V'Nisaydad Adonai Yeshia Melch Yaninu V'Yam Krinu Yechid Anin Merver Beino Melch Mashiach Lemon Vayid. Okay. Tonight's class is proudly sponsored, l'schus of the yard site of Maras Rivka Basar Avram. She should be a good better the Mashiach, the Hashem send us Mashiach right now. This is my grandmother. I am proud that it sponsored the learning for her. Okay, so we are so grateful to Hashem and the Rebbe for giving us outstanding teachers who are very enthusiastically encouraging us for this project and who are here tonight with us to teach with us. Mrs. Chaya Klein, administrator of mymikvahcalendar.org and certified college teacher. Please take it away. Taras Mishpacha.
Thank you, Zohar. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. I've gone through the whole day now. Okay. Thank you for joining us this evening. It is wonderful to be here with you again for part 2 of Becoming Nida. Last week, we discussed 3 of the ways that a woman can become Nida. 1, menstruation, her period, the most common way a woman will become Nida during her reproductive years. 2, hargasha, a distinct sensation that tells a woman that her period is beginning now or very shortly. And number 3, bedikas, the performance of a bedika, as we are halachically required to do at different times throughout the month for different reasons. I just wanted to let you all know that in case anybody missed last week, you can access last week's session and Be'ezras Hashem future sessions as well at mikvah.org, mikvah.org/power hour, one word. Okay? We will now continue with further ways that a woman may become Nida. Okay, so first of all, there is kinuach. Kinuach is wiping. Anytime that a woman does any external wiping of the vaginal area, with tissues, toilet paper, towels, or any cloth, and blood or any questionable color is found, this is problematic. And the halacha is the same regardless of the color of the toilet paper, tissues, or cloth used for the wiping. A shaila must be asked. Often, al pi minhag Chabad, according to Alter Rebbe, kinuach may even have the status of a bedika, especially if one wipes themselves to clean themselves, accidentally looks at the tissue, sees something, and then takes a clean tissue and wipes again to see what's going on. Train yourself to refrain from looking at tissues after use and to refrain from looking into the toilet bowl after use. There is never, ever a halachic obligation to do so. This only gives rise to shilas and confusion. Never do a bedika to see what's going on unless the Rav directs you to do so. So be careful not to look. What do we not do? We do not look at tissues or toilet paper or into the toilet bowl after use. If somebody accidentally did look and they did see something, do not throw it out. Set it on the side and save it to ask the Rav. Do not wipe again with the intention of seeing what's going on. I mean, don't wipe again and look. If you have to wipe again, don't look. And do not do a bedika unless so directed by the Rav. Another way a woman can become Nida is through childbirth or Rahman al-Islan, a miscarriage, a loss of pregnancy. This makes a woman Nida. There are differences of opinion at what point during labor a woman actually becomes Nida, and there are different opinions among the Rabbanim. My suggestion is that a woman, Be'ezus Hashem, during pregnancy, when she hits her third trimester, it's a good idea to pick up the phone, speak to the Rav, and ask him all the things you need to be aware of in this final trimester. Ask him at what point during labor you become Nida, what you have to be on the lookout for. And also ask him about the halachos involved in going into labor and the hospital on Shabbos or Yom Tov. Mikveh.org has actually just completed a beautiful booklet for sale on mikveh.org or in the office on the halachos of labor and childbirth on Shabbos and Yom Tov. Okay, please consult your Rav if there is any bleeding during pregnancy. Being pregnant does not absolve one from becoming Nida. Consult your Rav if there is any bleeding. Consult the Rav if there is any false labor or dilation. Regarding a C-section, today most women will bleed following a C-section delivery. However, if a woman would not have any bleeding, vaginal bleeding, please consult your Rav. Gynecological exams and procedures may make a woman Nida, depending on what is going on. A routine pelvic exam using a speculum, that's the instrument that the gynecologist uses to spread open the walls of the vagina so that he or she can see inside, or the use of the doctor's finger being inserted to feel the internal organs, does not cause any Nida problems and is not problematic. However, any time that there is what is called psichas harechem, an opening of the uterus, which usually occurs through the opening going into the cervix, this, according to halacha, causes even the smallest drop of blood to be expelled from the uterus, and this causes Nida status, even if no blood is visibly seen afterwards. Therefore, any medical exam or procedure that causes the uterus to open will render a woman Nida. A Rav should be consulted, and this applies even to women who have ceased menstruating. Therefore, regarding all gynecological examinations and procedures, in general, it is best, if possible, to schedule these examinations at the very end of your period, but before you have done your Hafsek Tahara and begun your count of Sheva Nakim. This way, you're already Nida, you can't become more Nida. Okay, and this eliminates the possibility of any shilas or issues. When one does have a gynecological procedure or exam scheduled, we need to be aware that, again, use of an instrument being inserted into the cervix requires halachic determination. A routine pap smear, where the doctor inserts a swab, much like a strep test swab, goes in and takes samples of the cells that are just at the very end of the cervix. Many Rabbanim feel that this is not an issue. Some Rabbanim feel that the doctor should be asked how deep the swab was inserted and the diameter of the swab used. It also if the doctor observed any bleeding, and if he did, where was the bleeding coming from? It's also important to know what the reason is for the swab, for the smear, because sometimes if a doctor suspects an issue, he may be more invasive and go deeper into the cervix for this specimen. Okay, whatever is going on, please check with your Rav before booking the appointment for this procedure. It is also advised not to do a pap smear on a day when a woman is halachically obligated to perform a bedika. If her appointment winds up coming out on such a day, please call the Rav before going to the doctor. Anytime that any sort of gynecological procedure or exam needs to be performed, it is important to consult the doctor and ask him for the name of the procedure and exactly what will be occurring. Will an instrument be inserted into the vagina? Will it go deeply inside enough that it will penetrate the cervix? If yes, how wide will that instrument be? This information must then be transmitted to the Rav to find out if there is any issue of possibly causing a Nida status. So again, when in doubt, check with the Rav. It is best to ask these questions of the Rav prior to booking the appointment, and the Rav will determine when best to do so. Again, if the procedure or exam does not cause Nida status, if there's no question of that, it's not a problem. However, if there is any chance that it may, it is always, as I said previously, good to schedule it at the very end of your period, but before you have performed the Hafsek Tahara. Sometimes a doctor may wish to take stitches on the cervix to maintain a pregnancy. A Rav should be consulted if this is required to be done. Internal examination during pregnancy to determine dilation, if dilation has occurred and if so, how much, should be consulted. The Rav should be consulted prior to such an exam, sorry. Internal exams that are commonly done during month 8 and 9 of pregnancy may be problematic. It is important to check with the Rav prior to these exams to be aware of what to be on the lookout for. Insertion or removal of an IUD, an intrauterine device, of course used only for birth control, used only with rabbinic heter, should also be done at the end of the period before the hefsek tahara, since it is going in and out of the uterus. If there's any doubt or question, please consult your Rav. If at any time following any gynecological exam or procedure, a woman has any spotting that she suspects may be vaginal rather than uterine, please consult the Rav. And various forms of birth control or hormonal therapies used only with a heter from the Rav may cause issues of bleeding or staining. Consult the Rav beforehand when you get the heter to use them to find out how to deal with this, to prevent this, to maintain tahara as much as possible. Taharenu.com is a very good resource for this as well. Never perform a bedika following a gynecological exam unless the Rav specifically tells you to do so. If any kind of gynecological procedure is done on an emergency basis or unexpectedly that you did not prepare for, please get all of the details and take these details to the Rav to determine if there is a problem of Nida or not. The next way that a woman can become Nida is dam basulim, the bleeding of the hymen, or the Nida status that results from Be'ilas mitzvah, first relations. This is a review geared towards married women, so I will not go into the details here. If there are any newlyweds that are having any issues with basulim, please consult your kala teacher and your Rav. This is also a point where I'd like to say that anybody that is a kala, the way to prepare for your wedding is to learn one-on-one with a certified kala teacher and not to do these reviews online, which are geared towards women that have already learned and are practicing these halachos. Okay. The next way that a woman can become Nida is through trauma. In the event that a woman suffers any sort of emotional or physical trauma, for example, let's say she received devastating news, lo yaleinu, or she was involved in an accident, or chas v'shalom fell or hurt herself. This is called trauma, and any staining that occurs following such an incident, even if it's found on color surfaces, needs consultation with the Rav. We will now go to the final way that a woman becomes Nida, and I put it last not because it's the least common, but because it's the one with the most details. And this is called stains, staining. Kesem, plural is kesamim. Please remember that when I say stain, I am not referring to anything that is found on a bedika cloth. Remember, anything seen on a bedika cloth of a questionable color always needs to be shown to the Rav. No matter how small, if you can see it, you cannot ignore it. It is relevant and has to be asked, and the shaila needs to be asked. A kesem refers to stains, not a flow, not even a flow that's much lighter than your usual period. And these stains are found with no feeling of hargasha, the feeling that you associate with your own period. Let's learn more about kesamim. Colors of stains. Well, we know the non-permissible colors, as we mentioned in the last class, are all shades of red and black. Permissible colors are clear, white, pale yellow, blue, and green. Questionable colors are orange, dark yellow, mustard, all shades of brown, gray, and in fact, every color of the spectrum that is not one of the okay colors. When a woman discovers stains on her clothing, her bed linens, her towels, or anything else, and she has absolutely no feeling of her period of hargasha, she simply, where did this come from? This is called a kesem. And a woman would be Nida only if this stain meets the following criteria. Size. Stains found on garments, bedding, towels, and etc. must be minimum size of a gris, which our Rabbanim translate to be the size of a US dime or larger, to be a problem. And it makes no difference what shape the stain is in. And therefore, it sometimes can be very difficult to determine the exact size of a stain, as very seldom do they come in these nice, neat little circles. Okay, most of the time, the stains that we discover on our clothing, our underwear, or elsewhere may be completely different shape. Not only are they a different shape, but they also may be a mix of colors. Some permissible colors mixed in with questionable colors, or even not okay colors. The question is how much is in there. So this can be very, very difficult for us to determine. Another factor is, even though there may be several stains, if they are not touching each other, then each one will be measured by the Rav individually. If they are touching in any way, they will be measured as one stain. All right. So of course, whenever you're in doubt, please consult a Rav on what the status would be of these particular stains. Now, although stains that are smaller than the size of a dime are not a problem halachically, a woman with Yiras Shamayim will still ask the Rav the first time or so that she sees this, and she can always ask the Rav if she needs to ask regarding such stains again in the future. And the reason I say this is because this leniency regarding size in halacha was based on the fact that generations past, lice were very prevalent. People had body lice. And a woman would sit down and squash a louse and have a blood stain. She'd roll over in bed, squash a louse, and have a blood stain. And so, since we know that Baruch Hashem today we do not have lice, at least I hope not, in any case, therefore, since we know we don't have this situation, and although the halacha still is there for us and for the leniency is to our benefit, it is still wise to ask the Rav the first time this happens to you, and then again, ask if you need to ask in the future. Now, the reason they came up with this leniency is because the blood of a louse was never as large as a gris or more. It was always less. So they said anything that's smaller is not a problem. Since the blood of a louse was never black, this leniency does not apply to any black stains. A black stain of any size, if you can see it, you cannot ignore it. It is relevant. And again, as I mentioned in the last class, if you are uncertain whether this actually came from you or from an external source, ink, dirt, magic marker, then please check with the Rav. The next criteria for stains to be problematic is location. To be problematic, stains need to be found on something that is makabel tumah. There are surfaces that are makabel tumah and surfaces that are not makabel tumah. Now, most of the fabrics that we wear and use as linens, towels, clothing, of course, are makabel tumah. However, there are other fabrics and surfaces and synthetic surfaces that are not makabel tumah. A Rav needs to determine this. So ask a Shaila if you found a stain on the tiled floor in your bathroom, your bathtub, the stall shower. Ask a Shaila if you found it on your floor, on your wall-to-wall carpeting, or your bath mat in the bathroom. These are Shailas for the Rav. The Rav will determine if it's problematic or not. Panty liners and pads may or may not be makabel tumah. There are differences of halachic opinion. So if a woman likes to wear these, she should ask a shaila of her Rav. Pads are also made of different fibers. Some are made of synthetic fibers and some are made of cotton. So a Rav should be consulted. The next criteria is the color of the surface upon which the stain is found. Stains must actually be found on a white surface to be problematic. Colored surfaces and fabrics have different halachic status. Now, if the fabric was multicolored and there are some white polka dots or white squares or white petals of flowers or anything else white in the design, then if stains are seen on that part of the design, this will be a problem, and this will be relevant and a shaila for the Rav. Therefore, we are advised that when tahora, women should wear colored undergarments and sleepwear and use colored linens and towels. For this particular halacha, there are two colors, white and every other color of the spectrum. So as long as the garments, linens, and towels are not white and have no white on them, they fall into the leniency of being found on a colored surface. There are some different opinions regarding off-white, which is very close to white. So if this is important to someone, please check with your own Rav. Now, there are different opinions amongst the Rabbanim regarding wearing black or very dark colors that are so dark that we cannot see what is going on. Some Rabbanim say not to wear them at all during Yemei Tahara. Some Rabbanim say that you may wear them on what is called the certain days of your cycle, Yamim Betuchim, the days when you know your cycle will not begin, versus the uncertain days of your cycle, Yamim She'ena Betuchim, the days when your cycle may be expected to begin at any time. Now, there are two opinions regarding determining what are the uncertain days. One is to look at the three hafloga numbers of the three newest cycles. Anything following the lowest hafloga number is considered an uncertain day. The second opinion, according to the Rebbe Rashab, is check the hafloga number created by the most recent cycle. Anything after that hafloga ona is considered an uncertain day. Many Rabbanim also say not to wear such dark colors anytime that there is uncertainty of bleeding or of a period beginning, such as during pregnancy, while nursing, during perimenopause, when a woman may skip periods, start periods, and skip periods, so she's never quite certain what may happen. Please verify with your own Rav regarding wearing these dark colors, when you may wear them and if you may wear them. Please also be sure to let your Rav know if you have any kind of anxiety over seeing stains on lighter colors, okay, or any lighter fabrics and so forth. Let the Rav know this, and the Rav will tell you what to do according to your needs. The leniencies described above in regards to stains, the size, color upon which it's found, and the surface upon which it's found, refer only to staining or light spotting that was not accompanied by hargosha, the feelings associated with your period. If there is a continuous flow, even if it is lighter than your usual period, if you see blood dripping or leaving your body, if you need a pad, these indicate a flow, and if you are ever uncertain, please ask your Rav. There are 6 situations where you still have to ask a shaila even when something is found on a colored surface. 1, if it is seen at the time you're expecting your period. 2, if you actually felt a hargosha, your feeling that you associate with the start of your period. 3, if there are repeated events. In other words, it happened again later in the day, happened again. Check with the Rav, see what he says about what's going on. 4, if it soaked through to the next layer of clothing, that it means it went through your undergarments to your slip, your pantyhose, your skirt. 5, if it is a thick glob, a mucus type that's not being absorbed into the fabric, or it is a large amount, and there are different definitions of what considered a large amount. So whenever in doubt, please check with your Rav. And 6, as I mentioned earlier, if it is found after undergoing any sort of personal trauma, be it emotional or physical. Stains that are found on the body below the waist in areas where it could have come from your private area, or on your hands or fingers after touching private area, always require a shaila, no matter the size. Stains found after marital relations always require a shaila. As I mentioned previously, even red stains that we would say, okay, that's Nida, forget it, don't ask. But again, anytime that a woman has unexpected red stains, or a woman has staining that is impacting her getting to the mikveh in a timely fashion, please consult your Rav. Do not suffer in silence. Black, again, always verify that it is from you. Anytime anything is inserted vaginally, internally, it will be judged more stringently. And so therefore, if a woman needs to insert an applicator for vaginal medication, or using a diaphragm for birth control with a heter, she should just remove it with her eyes closed. Don't look. Have the water running. Run it under the faucet. Don't look at it unless the Rav tells you to look at it. If it's disposable, have a paper towel ready. Wrap it up with your eyes closed and throw it out. It is advisable, though not a halachic requirement, that if a woman does see staining that does not render her nida, as per the leniencies discussed earlier, to hold off on relations until she has been clear of any staining for 24 hours. Refraining this way does not indicate that she considers herself nida. It merely gives time for her to evaluate the situation, see if the situation turns into a full flow. And if you're ever uncertain, please consult the Rav. If a woman is ever in doubt as to whether or not she is nida, she submitted a shaila, she's waiting to hear back from the Rav. She should never say she is nida, she should say she has a shaila. If she does state that she's nida and she acts as though she is nida, then a shaila needs to be asked on how she should proceed. A woman should never say in a joke or in anger, I am nida, because if she does say this, she would need to call the Rav and ask what to do. I hope this was clear. Thank you very much for joining us this evening. Please be sure to submit any questions you may have to Project Chana with one N, Power Hour, one word, @gmail.com. Again, that's Project Chana, Power Hour @gmail.com, so we can address them in the upcoming Q&A session on this topic. Thank you very much. Afreilich Chanukah, and I look forward to seeing you again.
Thank you so much, Mrs. Klein. That was so incredibly clear and interesting. And thank you for validating the need that we have to constantly ask shaylas. Sometimes we get shy. So thanks for encouraging that. I want to just say the number of the Basin, 718-604-8000, extension 5. Hotline all day long. And you can call and don't be ashamed here. Mrs. Klein told us we can ask whatever we need to all the time. Thank you.
Thank you for having me. Good night.
Thank you so much. Okay, is Rabbi Bell on, Esther?
Yes.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you, Rabbi Bell, for being here. Rabbi Bell is the Rabbi of Congregation Lubavitch, Montreal, and the Dayan of the Basin of Montreal, here to teach the women Hilchas Kashrus. Thank you so much, Rabbi Bell.
Hey, thank you very much. We're continuing from where we were last week, and so this is week 2. We're beginning with Basar b'chalav, and I'm not sure exactly how far we'll be able to get in 20 minutes, but let's just begin. I was also asked to give a bit of hashkafa, took some letters from the Rebbe last week. This is also addressing one of the questions. The Rebbe quotes this Din Shulchan Aruch, and the Rama says about a nursing woman who had to eat non-kosher food. Let's say her life was in danger and she ate non-kosher food. So the Rama says over here in Shulchan Aruch Yeredeya that if the woman cannot nurse, it cannot give the baby to a non-Jewish woman to nurse, because the matamtam 11 medulei tavara, that it will stuff up the heart and cause the child to have a bad nature. And so too, that it's going to, if the child eats non-kosher food or the mother ate non-kosher food and then nursed the baby, it nevertheless has a bad effect on the child, which is really quite amazing. This nursing baby is obviously not obligated, not only not obligated in mitzvahs, not obligated even in chinuch. Nevertheless, it has this this effect. So I'd mentioned this parenthetically last week, and someone asked if this happened, how long person by accident ate non-kosher food, how long do they have to wait? So it depends what they ate, and it's something which should be asked on an individual basis. This is a famous sikha, which is very, very important, I think, that all women should know. And it's in L'Kutei Sichos Chelik Yud Gimel, the Rebbe spoke about the reasons for the precipitous decline in Jewish observance. And he spoke about Taras Mishpacha and also spoke about Kashrus. And this is just a small piece from that sikha. It's in Yiddish in L'Kutei Sichos. This is translated into Hebrew from Shulchan Menachem. So the Rebbe writes over there, that brings them Svarim Kadeshim, that the person's characteristics are influenced tremendously by the food and drink that the person brings into themselves, that becomes part of their body, affects their physical health, affects their soul, affects their personality. Brings down from the famous Ramban that if you eat the non-kosher birds have a violent nature, and it brings violent characteristics into one's personality. So just like the non-kosher food affects the person's midas, their personality characteristics, it also affects the person's ability to think and the person's ability to reason. So this is just another reinforcing what we learned last week, and might be bringing in some other letters and sichos that Rabbi as we go along. It was mentioned nursing, so when speaking about midas teves, I found something interesting in Darkei Tshuva on this din that we just quoted about the nursing mothers. The Darkei Tshuva brings down from Mr. Chemet, quoting another sefer, that even if the Jewish woman who's nursing the child is, eating kosher food and everything, he's talking about, let's say the woman was unable to nurse, so you shouldn't get says in the top line over here, you shouldn't, you have to get hire a Jewish woman to nurse the baby. This was before they had formula, of course. But even if you're getting a Jewish woman to nurse the baby, you should exert yourself to find the woman nursing the baby should have midas teves leikaisonis v'leiragzonis. It shouldn't be angry and have a temper. So I think also something could be learned from in terms of how important it is, the mood that the woman sets in the house not only affects the emotional and spiritual environment in the house, Poshet Bagashmias has also an effect. Okay, so just to review, we had last week a general introduction, the uniqueness of Basar B'chalav. Let's go through these, and there were some questions also from last week. So we said the Basar B'chalav that has, in some ways, it's uniquely strict, in some ways uniquely lenient. So there was a question I mentioned parenthetically, and I did mention that it's not not being said as a halacha. It's just said that there are those that say that using a non-kosher microwave, you might, according to some opinions and there's some conditions, that there's actually basar, mamashas of basar on the walls of the microwave, and mamashas of basar and chalav, and according to those opinions, it says bishul mama could have a shaila just turning it on. That's not a halacha l'maisa, and if a person has to use a non-kosher microwave on a regular basis, they should be in touch with the Rav. Also on the subject of separation, this is a review from last week. Someone asked a question about using separate dish towels. We're going to be discussing, we're going to be going through the kitchen after we finish our principles about various areas of the house. But just to mention, I mentioned the minhag the women have using separate towels for drying milchik and fleishik dishes, and saying how halachically speaking, as long as the dishes have already been cleaned, which is why you're drying them, and the towel is clean, we don't really see anywhere any halacha that they have to be kosher, they have to be separate. Nevertheless, Jewish women are makbid on them. So there were some questions asked about that, but just one thing for sure, once they're washed and they're put in the washing machine, then they could be used for either type. You don't need to separate and designate one towel for milchik, one towel for fleishik. We spoke about the importance of asking shilas and setting up your kitchen in such a manner to minimize shilas in the first place. And then we got started on our list of concepts. But first we spoke about tam ke'ikr, because when we're speaking about kelim, about various utensils in the kitchen, which is most often the questions which arise in a kosher kitchen. So we explained the halachic background. The problem is tam ke'ikr, that the taste absorbed in the walls of the utensil have the halachic status basically of the food itself. How did that taste get in there in the first place? And how does it get out? So there are a number of ways that could happen. And last week we discussed the first and most common way is that it was used with heat. There are ways that it can get in without heat, and we're going to be speaking about some of that today. But first, I wanted to give more of a definition and hone in on this issue of the definition of what is called hot. So I mentioned it last week briefly, and I put it in the chart over here to make it clear. These are the other concepts. I don't expect to get through this whole list today, but we're going to start chipping away at this list today, and we'll see how far we get. So, general people are familiar with the concept of Yad Soledis Bay. I just got off the phone with somebody, asked the Shaila. And the person said, well, it was certainly not hot, I didn't burn my hand. I said, who told you Yad Soledis Bay means burning your hand? And the Gemara, bringing this down, the Gemara in Shabbos, it says, what is Yad Soledis Bay? Yad Soledis Bay means Krisa Shel Tinuk Nichbis Bay, which means the stomach of a baby would be burned. The Pri Megadim writes a Shulchan Aruch, they're talking about a newborn baby. So we're talking not about the hand, we're talking about a stomach, and not of an adult, of a baby, and not just a baby, a newborn baby, where the skin is very, very tender. So this has nothing to do with a person burning their hands. Now, just to give a little bit of context over here, so body temperature, you take your temperature under your tongue, so Fahrenheit 98.6, approximately 37 Celsius, boiling point is 212, and 100 Celsius. A hot tea is somewhere way up there, 160, 180. Okay, when you get to the various opinions, so we have a range of opinions what's considered to be Yad Soledis Bay. So the Shevet HaLevi, and I just took one. There are many poskim that weigh in, and often they correspond to these opinions of the Shevet HaLevi, and there are a number of other poskim that say 40 Celsius, which is approximately 104 Fahrenheit, which obviously is not very hot. And there are those that say that a baby should not be bathed in water warmer than that. I'm not mixing into how this is not a shir and how to nishmartem meid lenafshesechem and then fashas of your babies. But this is the lowest shir for Yad Soledis Bay. The Rav Moshe Feinstein held 110. Rishleim Zalman Arbach al held it was 113. Now the Kashas agencies, I'm just throwing this in because we will eventually, not now, we're learning Basar B'cholav now about differences between different hachshedim. So in your kitchen, you probably would give a lower temperature than this, that you would be machmer to consider something to be hot. Because in the halacha, it's binary, either it's hot or it's cold. And this is the dividing point, but since there's a whole machlekes of paskim, what precisely is the dividing point? So that's why in real life, it's not always so clear. So there are many cases, once you're above this, you should be asking a shaila. There might be other factors that would make it unnecessary to rely on the more lenient opinions. But once you get to that point, to be concerned that perhaps it absorbed through heat, and then again, your local Rav, whoever you ask your shailas to, will take everything into consideration and give up psak. Okay, so that's as far as heat is concerned. But there are other ways that taste could be transferred even without heat. So the biggest problem is that of a davar charef. We have a sharp food. The classic example is an onion or a radish. Let's talk about onions. So sharp, we're talking about the taste of the food. But it happens to normally go together with being cut with an onion. Now really, halachically, it's not necessarily related, because when we have vinegar or something, or lemon juice or something which has a very sharp taste, the same thing would happen. But normally, the most common cases in kitchen are that of knives and cutting sharp objects. So here you have a cutting board, and here you have a knife. So if you cut an onion in half, and let's say for argument's sake, this is a meat knife. So it's a fleischicken knife, and you cut the onion in half. And then you take that and you put it in the fridge. And it's not labeled of how it was cut. So halachically speaking, even though there was no heat, the combination of factors that you're using a knife, and there's something called duchid the sakina, that you're pushing down the pressure of the knife, together with the sharp quality of the food that you're cutting, makes that onion fleishik. Now, how fleishik? How far does it go? Again, all machlekes are passing, but certainly lechatchila, we are concerned that the whole onion became fleishik. Now, if you eat that onion, you don't have to wait 6 hours. It's not like it's a piece of meat as far as waiting 6 hours. But if you take this onion and somebody didn't know, and they cut it up and put it in a dairy pan and made a cheese omelet out of it, so those. I'm oversimplifying it, but I think it's better to oversimplify and make it clear. And then you'll have exceptions, obviously, to the rule, and it'll depend on the details of the case. But it's as if those pieces of onion are pieces of meat. So obviously, a person sees a cheese omelet with pieces of meat in it, they realize there's trouble. But people don't necessarily think that with an onion. Knives are dangerous, not only in terms of physical damage, but in terms of halachic damage, that this is the best argument for having parva utensils, or at least a parva knife. Now, in teaching through the years, I ask students, do you have parva in your house? So this is something, the best system. There are some people that say, how do you live without parv? You're going to get everything mixed up. And other people say, what are you talking about? If it's parv, you're not going to have 3 sinks. And then parv, for sure, everything's going to get mixed up. It has to be either milchik or fleishik and nothing in between. And others say, no, it must be parv. The best system is probably whatever you grew up with, whatever you're accustomed to now, if not what you grew up with. That's probably the best system. However, at least a knife, or at least a knife for cutting sharp things, and a cutting board too, because the Chaya goes further. Because again, I'm not paskening halachos, I'm just pointing out that there are paskim that will say that when you, let's say this was a parva cutting board, and you used a fleishik knife to cut the onion on the cutting board, so then this could also become fleishik, the cutting board too. And then what happens later on, and you're going to use a milchik knife on it? How far does this go? So it doesn't necessarily go forever, but many of these are discussed in the paskim, and in order to avoid shailas, one must be aware of this tremendous chumrah, and this many shailas come up in the kitchen. And when I say many shailas, I think I should probably clarify what I mean by that. There are all sorts of other shailas that are not really shailas. A person took a milchik pot and put it by mistake on the fleishik burner. We're going to talk about that. We're not going to get to it this week. But in order to have that turn into a real halachic problem, you have to be a pretty big lamdonis that should really end up being a halachic problem. So those shilas, people ask, and it's good that they ask, and things getting mixed up in the sink, and there's usually a heter for that too. Not always, but usually yes. When I say a real shaila, I'm talking something that could really treif things up. Real basar b'cholav. So the inyan of a dover charif is something that one must always be aware of, and even though it's cold, it can create tremendous halachic chaos in a kitchen. So one must be extremely careful about that. Another way the taste could be transferred from one place to another is through kobush, which means pickling, usually the way it's translated. So anytime something is left in a liquid for 24 hours, soaking, it's considered as if it was cooked, and the taste also gets transferred. Now, when basar b'cholav, it's midaraisa, midarabanan is another discussion, but certainly the taste gets transferred, at least midarabanan. If it's not basar b'cholav, it's midaraisa. In any case, kobush kimavushal, if something was soaked in liquid, it's as if it was cooked. If it was pickled in brine or something, vinegar or something that had a very sharp taste to it, then it's a matter of minutes until the taste is transferred. So if a person, for example, took milk and by mistake put it in a fleishik bowl and everything was cold, so the taste is only going to be transferred if it was sitting there for 24 hours. If it was less than 24 hours, so lechatchila that should not be done. But b'diavad, if it happened and everything was cold, so then the bowl is still kosher, the milk is also still kosher, as long as the bowl was clean. A mistake people commonly make, unfortunately, is they're traumatized the sight of milk in their chicken soup bowl, and they pour out the milk, and then they wash it with boiling hot water to make sure everything is eliminated. And of course, that boiling hot water could be creating the problem instead of solving the problem, so it should be rinsed off in cold water if anything like that happens. So this is all ways in which taste could be absorbed without having heat. Another very important halachic principle is that of zayah, steam coming off of food. When you're speaking about an oven, for example, people sometimes wonder, how did the oven get fleishik? The food is not touching the walls of the oven, and there's splattering, which could be, but there's usually any food which has some sort of liquid in it. When you're starting with a soft mixture, you're pouring a potato kugel into a baking pan, and this pourable food ends up becoming a solid food, it's because the liquid was cooked out of it. And the liquid is cooked out of it, so then there's zayah, there's steam coming out, and that steam is absorbed into the walls of the oven, which is another way that even if it wasn't touching, that the steam could be absorbed. And next week, I think I got to the end of my time period, and next week we will continue with this list with the very vital din of shtei kederes, the law of the two pots.
Thank you very much, Rabbi Bell, for giving us your time and for teaching us these vital halachos. And again, especially the power of knife, Baruch Hashem, now we know. And any questions, ladies, 604-8000 for the local basin in Crown Heights, extension 5 for the hotline for Shilas. Is Rabbi Braun on, Esther?
Yes.
Yeah.
Wow, thank you so much. It's our pleasure to have the Marda Asra of Shchunas Crown Heights here with us. And like I said before, thank you to these esteemed Rabbanim and teachers for encouraging this project and for giving their time to the women to learn these halachas. Rabbi Braun.
Okay. Just double checking. You can hear me there?
Yes,
Hear and see?
we hear you.
And we see you. Thank you.
Okay, beautiful. Okay. So let's get right into it. We were last week learning all about lighting Shabbos candles. I know everybody's thinking about Hanukkah candles, but we still have Shabbos coming up. And we'll have to do both Hanukkah candles and Shabbos candles. So last week we spoke about the reasons for the mitzvah, the importance of the mitzvah, who is obligated in the mitzvah, and so on and so forth. I want to focus this week on the candle, the place of lighting, the time of lighting, the Kabbalah Shabbos that happens through lighting, and about the brachas. And I want to talk a bit about Miftzah Neshek. Let's try to go straight into it. In terms of candles, there are different minhagim in Klal Yisrael, whether people light oil or people use the regular paraffin wax candles that we have. Now, some people argue there's a preference for oil. It is not the Chabad custom. And there's many reasons why it's not our custom, primarily because the candles that we have today burn just as well as oil, and there's no significance to oil. The main significance of oil and olive oil is because it burns better. Our paraffin candles burn just as well. There's no advantage. If anything, there's a disadvantage to oil, because when you have oil, it shakes back and forth. And that can be a shaila, especially when they're on the table, that can be a shaila of extinguishing, a shaila of moving the table, and all those kind of things. So that's the advantage of our regular candles. Some people have a family custom to do so, but it's not the Chabad custom, like the Rebbe writes. Talking about moving the candles, so besides for the issue of extinguishing the candles, when every time the candle moves, the oil moves back and forth, the wick moves from the oil, it's considered like lighting and extinguishing. There's also another issue, and that is that the table becomes muktzah. It is the meaning that we light the candles on the table. We'll talk about that in a moment. And because we light candles on the table could become muktzah. If you want to move the table on Shabbos, that's a problem. So we always put something on the table prior to candle lighting time, so that something which is more valuable than the candles, usually that would be chalas. Chalas are more important in halacha than candles. Or some people put a sefer, and that will make the table non-muktzah. And after everything is extinguished, there could be an ability of moving the table, although most families don't even move the table altogether. There is an option of lighting electric candles, and I need to make this very, very clear. Last week we spoke about that the mitzvah of Shabbos candles is not only in the dining room, but it's also in the bedroom and in every other room. Or at least light should get to the bedroom. When you get into the bedroom, it doesn't have to be burning on top of your head. You want to be able to sleep. And in all those other rooms, we use electric. By the Shabbos table, we want to do things properly. In the dining room and over there, we use regular candles. But that doesn't mean electric is not valid. If a woman is in the hospital for Shabbos, often they give out electric candles, and that definitely could be used in the hospital. And can even make a bracha. This is in contrast to Hanukkah lights. When it comes to the menorah, we cannot use electric. We do it to publicize the miracle. We can have electric menorah in our car. We can have electric menorah right outside our house, but that's not fulfilling the actual mitzvah. In terms of where to light the candles, so some people have this meaning they dafka don't light the candles on the table. Could be also because of that shilas of extinguishing of muktzah and all that kind of stuff. Some people argue, even according to Kabbalah, it shouldn't be on the table. But the Rebbe definitely did not hold that way. And the Rebbe emphasized many times, including the Alter Rebbe Shulchan Aruch, it's implied that the mitzvah the candle should be on the table. At least one, if not two candles, some people light a lot of candles per kid, at least one or even two candles should be on the table. And it's a matter of training our children and training the environment to make sure that those candles are in a safe way. If you're lighting extra candles, of course, you can put on the side on a buffet, close enough to where you're eating, because the idea is to illuminate the place where you're eating. If it's all the way if you have a very large dining room and it's all the way in the very, very far end, and it doesn't accomplish anything. It really sort of almost defeats the purpose. But the idea is that also when you're making Kiddush, you should be able to see the candles. You're supposed to look at the candles when you make Kiddush. That's where it's supposed to be. In terms of time of lighting, so there's an earliest time and latest time. So there's a time in the calendar which is called Plag HaMincha, and that's when we're supposed to, some of these things we did last week, so I'm just sort of recapping a bit. That's the earliest you can light the candles. You can light before Plag HaMincha. It's a Baracha Vatala. It's not considered lighting candles for Shabbos. You have to check your local calendar and check for the Plag HaMincha time. Now, some of the Reluchos have 2 Plag HaMinchas, and there's the Chabad version of Plag HaMincha. It's important to make sure you get the right one, because our Plag HaMincha is a bit earlier, which gives us a bit extra time to light Shabbos candles. And some calendars refer to it as the Gra. So don't get turned off by the fact that it says Gra and think that it's not Chabad. The Chabad and the Gra version is pretty much the same. That's the Plag HaMincha that we use, and that's the earliest you can light Shabbos candles. I can't give you a set time because it changes where you live and it changes based on the time of the year. It's a 1 1/4 halachic hour before sunset. A halachic hour really differs from one day to another. And it's always better to light candles earlier for so many reasons, including you have the mitzvah of Tosefah Shabbos, of adding to Shabbos. Your cutoff time is, the minig is 18 minutes before sunset, and you really should be finishing lighting candles 18 minutes before sunset. If a person really in a desperate situation and they didn't, they're allowed to go all the way till sunset, but that's really not a wise idea. There is a situation where a woman realizes it's already Shabbos, it's Shkia, and she didn't light candles. Oh, it's a terrible thing. She didn't light Shabbos candles. You're obviously not allowed to light once it's Shkia, and you shouldn't even attempt if you realize you're going to go into Shkia, just don't even bother lighting Shabbos candles, as terrible as that is. But there is an interesting thing. There's an option of lighting through a goy. So you can have a goy come, light the Shabbos candles, so long that it's bein hashmashas, the time between sunset and nightfall. There's a short amount of time, check it on the calendar. And that time, you're allowed to have a goy do even a malacha d'oraisa, if it's a very important need. Lighting Shabbos candle is considered a very important need. But that's 1 candle per family, per table. You not even light 2 candles. So if there's already candles there, just forget it. There's not even a heter for that. So you can have a goy to come, because nobody lit candles over here, and light 1 candle, and you make a bracha after he lights the candles, the goy, and it's a bracha al Hadlakos ner shel Shabbos kodesh instead of lehadlik. Just because of the change in behavior, you make a change in the bracha. Now, I mentioned Shkia, but some communities accept Shabbos early. If you're living in a place where everybody accepts Shabbos early, the majority of the cities accepting Shabbos early becomes Shabbos early for you too. And if Shabbos becomes early, then from that moment onwards, you can't light Shabbos candles, even though Shkia is much later. If in the summer, some people have early Shabbos. So you need to find out, if you're going away for a Shabbos, you have to find out what's locally done in that community. Sometimes there are different shuls, and different shuls have different practices. And if your husband is davening the shul with an early minyan, becomes a shayla if you even let it light Shabbos candles, because your husband is accepting Shabbos early, so you really have to light your Shabbos candles earlier. When we light Shabbos candles, at that moment it becomes Shabbos for us. And this is a very, very complex topic with a lot of different opinions, and we're trying to make things simple if you're not complex. But the minig clearly is, our minig, I don't mean only Chabad, the general minig today is that a woman, when she lights Shabbos candles, accepts Shabbos on her. Which is why we have an interesting practice that when we light Shabbos candles, is different than almost every other bracha. Normally, you make a bracha before you do a mitzvah. When it comes to Shabbos candles, we first light and then we make the bracha. And the reason for that is that the minute we're making the bracha, we might be accepting Shabbos just by the mere fact that we said the bracha. So we dafka light the Shabbos candles first, so therefore we don't have any problems, and only then we make the bracha. And because of this idea that lighting Shabbos candles is a form of acceptance of Shabbos, is another minig which Nashim, Neshei B'nai Yisrael have, that they drop the match in a safe way because they don't even want to extinguish their candle, their match once they lit the Shabbos candles. Do they accept the Shabbos? Now, there's a big debate if that custom is valid or not valid, and even though the Alter Rebbe brings this custom, it could be, it depends on, once we already changed the order of the brachas, maybe the custom is not valid. Be that as it may, that is the common custom, and we should honor the custom. It's not that the match obviously will extinguish, so it's not mamish. So long you didn't make the bracha, you really didn't fully accept Shabbos, you only lit the candles. But we try to sort of retain that concept, and by we at least don't extinguish it directly, we drop it. At least it shouldn't be an extra hefsek. It should be right after lighting the candles, we just drop the match. Those electric lighters, most of them are not a problem according to halacha. That's not part of the minig. If you want to see more details about it, you can look it up on the website. Ask the Rabbi. We talk about those electric lighters. There is an option of. Now, let me mention before we get to the option. Yom Tov, we don't have this problem really. Yom Tov, you're allowed to light candles in Yom Tov. So why would we have to drop? Why would we have to change around the order? Why do we have to do the bracha after the lighting candles? It was a very, very wise woman, Big Tzadekis. I believe it was the Drisha's mother, and she argued that Yom Tov we have to have a different minig. Yom Tov we should make the bracha before lighting, because Yom Tov is no problem of light. After you said the bracha, you word you accepted Shabbos. It's not a problem. You accepted Yom Tov. You're allowed to light candles on Yom Tov. But the consensus is, and that is our meaning, that we don't make a distinction between Shabbos and Yom Tov. We don't want to confuse things. We have a concept called loy plug. We don't make any distinctions. The same way on Shabbos, we make the bracha after we light. Yom Tov, we also make the bracha after we light to avoid any distinction. Men, when they light Shabbos candles, might have a different halacha. There's a big machlokes about that. I personally paskin usually for people that men should not do like women, because they don't have the minig to accept Shabbos when they light. You must accept Shabbos pretty soon after you light, because to show that the candles are for Shabbos, within the next 10 minutes, you have to accept Shabbos regardless. But you don't have to accept Shabbos at the moment of candle lighting. Men don't have that minig. And if a man should do the way you normally do, make the bracha first and then light. Now, there is an option of a t'nai, and this is a very important concept. There's something called making a stipulation that if this, for some reason you have to light Shabbos candles, you can't push it off. It's getting late. But there's something that you have to do after Shabbos candles, which is forbidden to do once at Shabbos. You can make a stipulation that even though the minig is that we normally accept Shabbos when we make the bracha and we light candles, I want to make a stipulation that I want to accept Shabbos. So there's such a concept, but it says in Shulchan Aruch that we shouldn't rely on this t'nai only in real serious great needs. And that has to be assessed on a case-by-case basis, what's considered a great need. You want to drive to shul, so don't drive to shul, stay home. I mean, you don't have to go to shul. Because you want to drive to shul after you lit Shabbos candles, that's not a reason to make a t'nai. Certainly a person who does this every single week, they're really going, in a sense, abolishing the minig. The minig is not to make a t'nai and to always accept Shabbos candles. If there's a great need, there's room to go out of that minig. But to start making a t'nai every single week really makes a joke out of the minig. Now, one of the places where this is relevant is, before I go to one of the places where this is relevant, I should point out, a lot of people don't know this, Yom Tov, you can't make a t'nai. Because Nishei B'nai Yisrael accepted a beautiful minig, and the Rebbe spoke a lot of times in praise of this minig, although some people criticize the minig. The Rebbe spoke very positively about this minig, that Jewish women have taken upon themselves a minig that the shechiyanu for Yom Tov, they don't wait for Kiddush, and they say it already at candle lighting. They want to chaper line the shechiyanu for Yom Tov at the very first Yom Tov mitzvah. So when they light the Yom Tov candle, they're already saying the shechiyanu. Because you say shechiyanu, that is an acceptance of Yom Tov, you can't make a t'nai, you can't make a stipulation and say shechiyanu, vigiyanu, vigiyanu, zmanazeh, we've accepted the Yom Tov. Oh, but I made a stipulation, I'm not accepting Yom Tov. That's a contradiction in terms. You could light Shabbos candles and not accept Shabbos in theory, although we shouldn't be doing it in practice. But you can't do it when it comes to Yom Tov. And therefore, Yom Tov, there's no t'nai whatsoever. You make a bracha shechiyanu, it is Yom Tov for you. And even when you are making a t'nai, like I said, that is limited in scope, you can't just do this on a regular basis. One thing where Paiskim say is a good idea to make a t'nai when it comes to davening mincha. It's important for a woman to daven mincha. The main halach, the primary halach is that a woman should be davening at least Shemon Esrei, Shachris and mincha. A lot of women have different reasons why they can't. They're busy, but it's a very important thing. And it doesn't make sense to daven mincha after you're saying you're doing lighting Shabbos candles, which normally is an acceptance of Shabbos. You're accepting Shabbos and then you daven mincha from Friday. So we can't really say that you're not allowed to daven mincha then. There are people that say you're not allowed to. That's a extreme word to use, but I would use something more moderate, say it doesn't make sense to daven mincha then. So one way to get around the problem is making a t'nai, and then it could still daven mincha. And that's a valid reason for making a t'nai. Again, we shouldn't make a habit out of that. But that is a legitimate reason. Now, when it comes to talk more about the bracha. When it comes to the bracha of Shabbos candles, there's many mistakes that can happen when people are very overwhelmed when it comes to lighting Shabbos candles. It's a stressful time sometimes. It says a Satan and Yetzirah come and dafka at that time and they try to make anger happening in Jewish homes, and we have to be conscious of that. It's also a very holy time. It's an important time when we're busy, and sometimes a woman can forget to make a bracha. So the halacha is, Alter Rebbe says it's very clearly, you're allowed to make the bracha so long the candles are lit. We actually are making the bracha after we light. Remember, we said that earlier, even though we already did the mitzvah already. And the reason we make the bracha after we light How do we get around the fact that the bracha has to always be before mitzvah? Because the mitzvah is the benefit of the light. The mitzvah is not the lighting of the candles, which is why a Jewish woman had the custom, they cover their eyes, and there's many different minhagim, they move around the hands a couple of times, these are all minhagim, but a beautiful minhagim that enhance this idea, and part of it is to show they're accepting Shabbos, they wave their hands a certain direction, but the main thing is to close their eyes, cover their face, so they don't enjoy the light yet, so they lit the candles, then they cover, their eyes are covered, and only after they make the bracha, they open their eyes, and now we're actually doing the mitzvah. So because the main idea is the fact that the candles are lit and not the lighting of the candles, if a woman forgot and didn't make a bracha, she can make a bracha even after she lit the candles, so long the candles are still lit. That's a very important thing to know. There are many mistakes that could happen. People make the wrong brachas. I should make this very, very clear that we have in the luach that we give out for every single Yom Tov, we go through the various potential mistakes that people make. You can check those charts, but I'll just say the basic principles. That if you say instead of Shabbos, you say Yom Tov, you haven't fulfilled the bracha because it's the wrong thing. And if you say instead of Yom Tov Shabbos, you also haven't done the bracha. The only exception to that is Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur. If you don't say Yom HaZikaron, which is a Chabad custom, everybody else doesn't do that on Rosh Hashanah, they just say Yom Tov. Or Yom Kippur, you don't say Yom HaKippurim, you just say the general word Shel Yom Tov. That is okay. It is, after all, Yom Tov. When it comes to Yom Tov, which is Yom Tov and Shabbos, and you only mention one of them, you only mention Shabbos, only mention Yom Tov, you also have to fulfill the mitzvah. If a woman didn't say Shechiyanu on Yom Tov at Lich Benshon, that's perfectly fine. You don't even have to say Shechiyanu at Lich Benshon. Remember, that's a minig that we've accepted upon ourselves. But really, the ideal time for Shechiyanu would have been Kiddush. So you didn't say it at candlelighting, say it at Kiddush. Or Yom Kippur, you didn't say it at candlelighting, say it in Shul at Kol Niddah. That's perfectly fine. And of course, after the brachas, there's all the special requests that we daven for our children. Candlelighting is a very appropriate time to daven to Hashem, and that's a good thing, and that accomplishes a lot. Two more things in the next 4 minutes that we have. This is a power hour. We have to keep every single minute precious over here. There is a halacha that if a woman forgets to light Shabbos candles, she gets a penalty. It's such an important thing that even if it was just because she forgot, she gets a penalty and she has to light an extra candle. There's a lot of halachas about this penalty, how and when this penalty applies. And a lot of it is subject to debate. So first of all, if it's with absolute onus, it's totally not her fault, is forgetting because you forgot, because it wasn't so important for you, because obviously it's important, but not that important, because you don't forget things that are critical. So it wasn't critical. And this forgetting is mamish out of their control. So to make that assessment, the person should always call a Rav and ask the Rav, do they have the knas? Do they not have the knas? And it's not a terrible thing if they have the penalty of lighting an extra candle. So they'll have an extra candle, have more light in their home. There's questions about Yom Tov, if the knas applies on Yom Tov. And the compromise about Yom Tov is not the same as Shabbos, is that if a person forgot to light Shabbos candle, Yom Tov candles on Yom Tov, so they should light for now an extra one only on Yom Tov, not on Shabbos. There's a question if it applies to girls who light Shabbos candles. After all, it's not the primary field of lighting for girls. It's only for the mothers to light. So again, let them light at least one extra candle for the following week. There's a question if a woman lit less than the regular amount. In other words, she didn't forget to light Shabbos candles, but instead of lighting the 2 candles, she lit 1 candle. So running 3 candles, again, light an extra one the following week. That's a reasonable compromise. And now I want to talk briefly about the Rebbe's mitzvah neshek, of lighting Shabbos candles for girls. That's something that the Rebbe introduced, and the Rebbe spoke about this, and he said that really this custom was an ancient custom that was forgotten, and the reason it was forgotten was simply because it was difficult to find candles even for the balabasta, so to get other people to light, and the Rebbe for many years tried to do research and find from so many families to prove that this was their custom in Ger, in Sada Ger, in Vizhnus, in Babiv, in Chazanish, Bells, Valozhin, Brisk, so many different sources, this was their custom. And the Rebbe brought evidence from Rivka. Rivka lit before she was married, and she was only 3 years old. But the Rebbe said as soon as she could speak, she could make the bracha, she could already light Shabbos candles. It's ideal thing if she could already make a shechiyanu with them, so we buy her a new garment, or she does it together with Yom Tov, so she makes a shechiyanu with the Yom Tov. The Rebbe wanted that a girl should light first, before her mother, so the mother could help her, and also halachically it's better if the girl lights first. And of course, this mitzvah of Niddah Shabbos Kodesh applies also on Yom Tov. Now, I want to touch on 3 questions that we got. One question we actually really dealt with. There was a question following up from last week. If you fulfill the mitzvah of Niddah Shabbos, if I'm using tea lights and I'm eating out. So we spoke a lot about this last week, that when you're lighting and there's electric, most of our houses are lit with electric, your lighting is adding extra light, and that's what we're making a bracha on the extra light. But that extra light only is meaningful in the place of eating, because in any other room in the house, you don't need extra candles. It doesn't accomplish anything. In the place of eating, it brings extra simcha, there's candles by the table. So therefore, if you're eating out, you really should be lighting at your host's place, because if you're lighting in your house, you're not eating there. So the options are, and I'll just tell you briefly what those options are. You can have a Shabbos timer in your house that the lights are not on when you're lighting the Shabbos candles, and therefore you will benefit from the candles without having any electricity at the time of candle lighting. You could have a timer to turn the lights off when you come before the candles burn out, and you'll use long-lasting candles. So the candles actually provide light even while the electric candles are off. You can have another option. You can light at home, and you can have a small snack near the candles when you come home. And like this, you'll benefit from that extra light for eating. Or you could actually light at the host. Those are the options. And finally, last question. I do need to wrap up. There was a question, which is a very, very controversial question. Is there any truth to that idea that a single woman living on her own should light 2 candles? There's a lot of merit to that idea, and that's highly debated, and there's no clear consensus. The Rebbe said, interestingly, that even though the mitzvah of Shabbos candles usually at least 2 candles, girls should only light 1. And people challenged the Rebbe about that, and the Rebbe gave many explanations why he introduced that. A lot of reasons why he dafka didn't want to introduce 2. And this is a debate amongst Lubavitcher Rabbanim as well. So, but since the original mitzvah is 2, so when a girl is lighting at home, her mother's at least lighting 2. When she's in seminary or even in college campuses, when we do mitzvah, there's other people lighting. There's going to be 2 candles. But if she's living all by herself, there's only 1. So who's going to fulfill the minhag of doing 2? Other people say, but the Rebbe had good reasons. The Rebbe didn't want the girls should feel equal to their mother. And therefore, even though at this stage it's not only a mitzvah of the Rebbe, when a girl is all by herself and she's a bas mitzvah girl, it's not a question of chinuch. It's actually halacha that she's supposed to light Shabbos candles even before the Rebbe came out with the mitzvah. But the Rebbe didn't, since you are yotzei mitzvah with 1, therefore it's better to light 1. I myself have changed my mind a few times back and forth about this. I don't have a clear consensus of this. And whichever way you do is fine. There's an argument to light 2, because now you're actually doing the mitzvah properly, and you're obligating the mitzvah. It's not only because of the Rebbe. When a girl is over bas mitzvah and living herself, she has to light Shabbos candles. Even if there wouldn't be a mitzvah of the Rebbe, maybe she should therefore light 2. And the argument, the flip side is the Rebbe is set to light 1. And 1, you are yotzei the mitzvah after all. And I'm more inclined to say that way. In mitzvah shall meet again next week. We'll follow up on the next topic, Hilchos Shabbos. Gute Nacht, Besudas Tevis. I have to run.
Thank you so much, Rabbi Braun, for giving us the details and background of these relevant halachos. Thank you, ladies. I'm just going to end with a Mashiach thought. A lot of ladies gave us feedback that they're getting so much in 1 hour, and they're wondering how they can keep up with all the material. So I know I myself, I'm going to go to mikvah.org/power hour. You can see the replays over there. And if you want to sponsor a class, or if you have questions or feedback, Project Chana powerhour@gmail.com. The Mashiach thought I got from Mushka Zirkin's daily post in Parshas Vayeshev, Tafshin Nun Beis. The Rebbe said, open your eyes and see that there's a higher reality that exists in this world. I remember clearly Rebbetzin Heller, Aleh Shalom, taught us in Beis Rivka Seminary, open your eyes means notice the hashgacha pratis, the good things that are happening all around us, and say that it's a miracle, not just a coincidence. This brings Mashiach. We know that the Rebbe said we should learn Inyan Gula Mashiach, to make Mashiach come the fastest, easiest way. There are resources for learning. You can go to learnmashiach.com. You can join a chat for the daily Mashiach Minute post by Mushka Zirkin. You can join a chat where Mushka posts Rabbi Majeskin's weekly shir. It's in the chat box, all those chats that you could join. You can also call Mushka if you didn't have a chance to save or download it. You can call her 718-915-6163 to be joined to her chats, or go to learnmashiach.com. Thank you, everyone, for joining us tonight. There is no class next week. A Freilichen Chanukah.